We were discussing the human being, that the human being is the center of the universe, and everything that was created, the terrestrial, the celestial, all details and aspects, whether it's unintelligible creatures, whether it's fish, whether it's vegetation, the ecology, the topography, the oxygen, or man's internal makeup and external makeup, internal organs, external limbs, all this is to correspond to the spiritual potential of the human being. And the spiritual potential is rooted in the soul, which is the spiritual component of the human being. And the essence of the human being is a soul. The body is only to facilitate and to be able to meet the challenges that the soul is meant to address and to advance itself. That initially was the concept of the creation of man. As it says, when God put Adam in the Garden of Eden, he was put there to work it and to protect it. When Adam was brought into the Garden of Eden, God said to him, all the trees of the garden are permitted to you, except there's one tree, the tree of knowledge, which has the fruit of good and evil, that's forbidden. The day you eat, you will die, meaning you'll be subject to death. But the Midrash tells us, God said, I created an unbelievable world for you with unlimited capacity. It's all yours. Please make sure to live within it responsibly. Don't destroy my world, because you have the ability to destroy my world. Relatively speaking, pre-sin, post-sin, we're talking about existence is infinitesimal compared to what it was pre-sin. Factually, Adam destroyed the world. The world would have been eternal. The world is no longer eternal. The physical world, just as the human being was the composite of spiritual, physical, and if man does succeed, he spiritualizes his physicality, identically, the world would have reached a level of perfection that the physical world would have assumed a spiritual status and functioned in that capacity. Although materially it was physical. But because Adam chose to eat of the tree of knowledge, and he allowed that evil to enter and be intermingle and be intermeshed in the physicality of the world was actually, relatively speaking, destroyed. It doesn't have a semblance of what it was meant to be. As this physical world has no semblance of the world to come, identically, the world post-sin is a different reality than the world pre-sin. And that's what God pleaded with him. He says, I'm giving you this unbelievable opportunity. What you're able to accomplish is not to be imagined. Please take care of my world. Don't destroy it. Adam, unfortunately, because of the whole story with the ancient serpent, with Chava, his wife, and she had eaten, and she gave him to partake of it. And that was not the beginning of that, it was the end. If you think about for one moment, from that moment going forward, if Adam wouldn't have eaten of the tree of knowledge, the Zohar says that Adam was created on the sixth day of creation, which is Friday, what we call Friday. If he would have been able to withstand the temptation and he would have met the challenge, the Zohar says, according to one opinion, that the fruit of the tree of knowledge was the grape. Adam would have taken that grape, squeezed its juice into a cup, and he would have said Kiddush Friday night on that cup of wine. And the world would have been forever on that perfect level. But because he ate of that grape pre the moment that he was meant to, therefore he was putrefied, self-mutilated, destroyed, and the world is a different world. Now, since Adam failed, what is the basis for every sin from Adam till the end of time? Why is man inclined to sin? We had said that when that evil intermingled into the human being, it's like a person who allows himself to take a foreign substance and he becomes addicted to the most lethal type of or drug, heroin, and it just intensifies the craving. When Adam ate of the tree of knowledge, what he embedded or infused into the human being, into humanity, that drug, that overwhelming drug that draws us to physicality, draws us away from spirituality, to bring us to a point which is the antithesis of spirituality. So that means every sin from Adam going forward is due to eating of that tree of knowledge. So when we speak about desecrating God's name, when we speak about crossing lines, transgression, who is that transgression due to? Because Adam partook of that tree of knowledge. Could you imagine the level of liability and responsibility that Adam carries, that every Chil Hashem till the end of existence is due to that decision of eating of the tree of knowledge? I mean, it's not to be believed. It's like we find the Torah tells us when Cain killed Abel, God says to Cain, where's your brother? He says, am I my brother's keeper? So God immediately says, the bloods of your brother are crying out to me, meaning your brother, if he would have lived, he would have fathered a family. That family would have had there would have been generations descending from Abel. But because you ended his life, all those lives that could have been are no longer going to be. So you're responsible for preventing from all those lives coming into existence. Since the bloods of your brother are crying out to me. Identically, because Adam ate of the tree of knowledge, what did he cause? What were the ramifications of that? Every sin till the end of time is because of that one action. That's what it is. It's not to be believed. Adam, he repented for 130 years. He separated from his wife. Seth, who's the third son of Adam, was only born 130 years after he was created. And the Talmud asks, why was there such a hiatus? He says, because the Talmud says, because he was in sackcloth, doing tshuva, repenting for the sin of eating the tree of knowledge. That's what he was. If the tshuva is accepted, it's irrelevant what the ramifications of that action is. If he's forgiven. But reality-wise, the state of affairs of existence, the destruction of the temples, mankind's misbehavior, whatever you want to say, the great flood. God says man is inclined to evil from the moment he's cast from his mother's womb. Where does that come from? That comes from the tree of knowledge. It was Adam ate of the tree of knowledge. You know, I'm not into genetics, but if a person in a certain family, if there's a defect in a gene, you know, it's passed down from generation after generation. Whatever it is, sometimes it skips a generation. Sometimes it's from whether it's epilepsy, whether it's multiple sclerosis, God forbid, any of these diseases, whatever way you classify medically, the way you classify these states of what deterioration, most times they're hereditary. It's because of a defective gene. Every human being has a defect in his genetic makeup. The defect in his genetic makeup, in his genome, is the evil of the tree of knowledge. And that's why all of us, you know, there's a study, you know, that there's a classification, they're called crack babies. That if the mother, God forbid, when she's pregnant, takes crack, the child is born a crack baby because through the uterus and in the womb, the child absorbs all that foreign substance, and the child's born an addict. Could you imagine? Every human being descending from Adam and Eve, because they have that in their system, every generation till the end of time is born with this defect in its genetic makeup. That's the genetic profile. Genetic profile of man is inclined from the moment he's cast from his mother's womb to be inclined to that physicality, which very often, unfortunately, is something which is contrary and the antithesis to spirituality. You know, it's very interesting. On a Torah level, a father has an obligation to teach his son Torah. It's his father's obligation. A person who has Torah knowledge has an obligation to disseminate that knowledge to other Jews. It's a Torah obligation. A father to a son, a person to his grandchild, and a person who has Torah knowledge has an obligation to share that with every other Jew, if he can. Now, you say a father brings a child into existence, he's responsible. Just can't leave him and just abandon him. He has to be, in the physical sense, in the educational sense, he has to be raised, he has to be refined, he has to be mentored, he has to be molded, and he has to be directed. He has to be taught certain abilities. The Mishnah tells us that a father has an obligation, multiple obligations. When he's 8 days old, his son, he has to circumcise him. At 30 days, he has to redeem. That's redemption of the firstborn if he's a firstborn. Then he has to teach him Torah. Then he has to teach him a trade, a livelihood, to earn a living. That's an obligation of father to his child. And in one opinion, he has to teach him how to swim. Because if he doesn't know how to, if you bring your child, you don't teach him how to swim, he may be confronted with a situation where his life will be in jeopardy because he doesn't know how to swim. So a father has full responsibility. You bring a child into existence, you're fully responsible to take care of that, to raise that child, to provide for that child the wherewithal, not talk about financial means, but the wherewithal within himself that that child should be able to fend for himself to survive existence and to be productive in existence. That is the responsibility of a parent to a child. Identically, in the spiritual sense, if the objective of life is to meet challenges of spirituality, a father has an obligation to provide that knowledge and that education and that value system to be able to deal when the person is confronted with the challenges of life. Because otherwise, especially if we're inclined to material and to everything which is contrary to spirituality, he needs the means to be able to deal with that. And since Torah is the tavlin, the Torah is the antidote to that physicality, to all the desires and the lusts and the machinations of the evil inclination. Therefore, that's an obligation a father has to a son, to raise him responsibly, to provide the ability to contend with all these onslaughts of life. And life it's an ongoing onslaught. In the words of the Ramchal, life is a four-front battle. In front of every direction, wherever you turn, there's no moment until from the day you're born till the day you check out of this existence. Every moment is a level of challenge. We're not even aware that there's challenges. Give you an example, equivalent case. Person earns a phenomenal salary, and the person has an ability to be a producer, and they're paying him $10 million a year salary because they understand his capacity. And every trade he does on Wall Street or every business deal he transacts, he could have, because of the person's capacity and ability, he could have a phenomenal return for the company he's working for. And that's why they're paying him this unbelievable salary. and they walk into his office, and he's reading a magazine rather than looking at his screen doing the trades. So they said, well, what's going on over here? Well, I think I made enough money for the company today. That's what he tells the person who owns the company. So the person says, what do you think we're paying your salary? What do you think we pay your rent? What do you think we pay for your wardrobe? What do you think we underwrite you totally, besides your salary? What do you think you're going to get a bonus? Because you're a producer. And we're paying you for every moment that you're in our employment. That's 10 hours a day or 8 hours a day. That's what we're providing that. And by not investing the time as you should, you're causing a tremendous loss of profit for the company. And the profit is unbelievable, the profit you could generate. God underwrites us 24 hours a day, every aspect of our existence. If we make the right decisions and we meet those challenges, the profits of that which are generated surpass anything that exists in this existence. God comes in and checks on you. So how you doing? What's going on? Well, if you have to sleep because you can't, that's just part of life. In Kemach Ein Torah, we're physical beings, we have to address our physical needs. But the man says, you know something? I think I'll take a little extra time, and even more than extra time. I think I'll spend 8 hours a week on the golf green. And then I have to go shop for, can't go and join that country club unless you have the right kind of clothing. So I have a private advisor who advises me what kind of clothing to buy. Then you have to get those spiked shoes, because when you walk on the golf green, you don't want to slip down into the trap over there. So you got to have that. And then then you have to learn to get your ski instructor. So when you go to Vail and you ski with all your contemporaries, you want to look good on the slopes. And you want to learn, you have to read the books, how to drink wine and how to open up that bottle and what kind of scotch you should drink and then what kind of martini you should drink and this and that. God says, are you serious? Who do you think's funding you? Who do you think's underwriting your salary? Who's underwriting your whole system? You don't realize what you're able to generate, what you're denying yourself. Not what you're denying God. You're denying yourself. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, which is the end of life, you're going to be left high and dry. And God only brought you into this existence and provided this to give you the infinite opportunity to be a self-achiever. And you deny yourself all that. It's beyond insanity. But that's what existence is all about. And that's why the father has to teach his child the script and the perspective and the narrative, and give him an understanding of the value of what life is, what the value of a moment is, what you're able to produce. We spoke about, at one time in the United States, there was a thing called the work ethic. Especially, when the American soldiers went to fight during World War II against the Japanese, against the Germans, they fought like nobody fought. Why? Because these people lived through the Depression, and they understood that unless you do it, unless you fight for your life and for what you have nothing. They appreciated what it meant, what freedom meant. They appreciated what accomplishment meant. They weren't born with a silver spoon in their mouths, these people. Therefore, when their existence and whatever they achieved was at stake, they fought beyond their capacity. That's the way they fought, because there was a work ethic. And when they came post-war, these people, there was nothing which was too difficult for them to raise their families, provide a livelihood for their families, provide education for their families, because they understood the value of what that is. Nothing is taken for granted. A human being has to understand, a Jew specifically, what exactly is the value of life? What is the work ethic of a Jew? How do we invest our lives? That comes through a Jewish education. That is the father's first and foremost responsibility. Of course, he has to provide the physical, the material for the child, Without that, a person can't survive. But in addition to that, coupled with that, even more important, simultaneously, to give that child an understanding of who he is. What is my value? What is my purpose? Why am I here? Therefore, the father has an obligation to teach his child Torah, because that is what it's all about. That's the script. That's the script of life. And if other person has knowledge, Torah knowledge, he has to disseminate it to anybody who's able to impress it upon, because this is actually the ultimate, which is vital. We speak about communal responsibility. Jews have communal responsibilities. Every Jew is responsible for every other Jew. So why do I have an obligation to disseminate Torah and to impress a person who I feel I could impress, to set him right, or to give him a level of clarity? I always say, many years ago, there was a person, he was a sales representative in the automotive business. And my father, Olav Shalom, bless his memory, gave him a tremendous amount of money. And I was starting a certain project, Torah project, which had to do with outreach. And my father says, the person's name was Green, his last name, Green and Company. They were automotive representatives. And my father said to me, you make enough money on me. I think you should give $5,000 to my son for this project of this. So the person was, he says, it's bringing Jews, teaching Jews their heritage, teaching them what it means to be a Jew. He says, I'm not into proselytizing. That's not my thing. I don't think it's the right thing to proselytize. Like missionaries, not into that. So my father didn't know what to say. So I said to my father, I said, Dad, I want to explain to you something. When I go out and do outreach with Jews, I don't want them to be anything other than who they're supposed to be. Missionizing, proselytizing means you want to take somebody who's not and make him something that he's not, and he doesn't have to be that. When we're not coming to convert Gentiles to become Jewish, that's not what it's about. It's something which is your inheritance, which is your heritage, which is rightfully yours. And unfortunately, because the person was never educated and never offered it and see what he really possesses and what's rightfully his, that's what we're talking about. We're not proselytizing over here. We're not missionizing. If you have a person and he's about to eat something that's poisonous and you stop him, don't meddle in my life. What do you mean don't meddle in your life? And if you don't realize what you're doing to yourself, you're taking your life. So by me doing what I'm doing and not allowing it, I'm giving you life. Life which is rightfully yours. That's what it is. So Jews who have communal responsibility, because we can't do it ourselves. A human being has too many blind spots, and the blind spots are due to conflicts of interest. A third party doesn't have the conflict of interest of someone else. Therefore, if a third party it's more easy for him to intervene, because he has greater clarity very often than the person who's actually being challenged for whatever that challenge may be. But what's the objective? The objective is to meet the program. What is the objective? The objective is not the material. The material is only to facilitate the spiritual. That's what it's about. The father, of course, has to feed his child, clothe his child, teach him how to swim, teach him a livelihood. What's the value of livelihood? Livelihood is to have their 4-car garage and pay the electric company more money than people need to live for a year per month. Is that what it's about? Or it's only to accommodate your physical existence to be able to function in what you're supposed to be? Many years ago, there was a person, he was a genius, computer genius, and he worked for the Rothschild Bank. And he came from a very wealthy family in Canada. And he would travel always. This is before he became observant. Traveled all over the world. He would stay in hotels because he represented the Rothschild family, $10,000 a night rooms, because he hosted those kinds of clients. And he would have a limousine, some Rolls Royce, taking him around, chauffeured, representing the Rothschilds. He told me after a while, he couldn't stand it any longer. The wardrobe, the opulence, the restaurants, he couldn't tolerate it. He said, it wasn't me. You know, I have no interest in that. But because I have to host the clients, therefore they provide those amenities to be able to succeed, to bring in the client. So what is the value of the Rolls Royce, the hotel room, the suite, and this and that? Is it that? If that, ultimately you start choking on it. You start regurgitating it. Because again, its value is not it. It's not to live as a hedonist. It has an objective. It's to facilitate and attract the client that you'd be able to close the deal. That's what it's about. Life is to close the deal. What's the deal? Closing the deal is to, when the bottom line is you succeeded as a Jew. You met the challenge. And each challenge is tailor-made for every human being. No two people have the exact same challenges. And even they seem to be the same, the nuances of difference. And only God knows the difference. And based on that, and that's the reason why you can't pass judgment on another person so easily. Because for one person, it's an impossibility. And he's not confronted with that. For another person, it's a shoo-in, it's nothing. So don't be so high and holy than thou. Well, if I would have been confronted, I could have done it with my hands tied behind my back. You know, something. You have different spiritual makeup. Your issues are not that person's issues. A person, God forbid, is crippled, can't walk well. You're born healthy. He needs a brace, he needs a crutch. Do you pride yourself that you can walk without a crutch, without a brace? It's understood. Because you don't have the handicap the other person has. Every person is born with a handicap. And that handicap is the basis for your challenge. Some people, they don't have that handicap. Therefore, the challenge is not a challenge. As a result of that, don't be holier than thou to pass judgment on anybody else. Why couldn't he meet the challenge and I could meet the challenge? But again, what is the objective? The objective is life is a means, it's not an end. That's what life is all about. Next time, we're going to speak about the linkage, which the philosophers have difficulty with this. How could a physical act generate something? The physical is finite. Spiritual seems to be infinite. How could something finite generate an energy which is infinite if the source of the energy is finite? That we will discuss. Everybody have a good Shabbos. We're back on Sunday, 9 to 10. Something simple today. And we're going to have 11 to 12.
Good Shabbos, Rabbi. Thank you.
Everybody have a good Shabbos.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbos,
Rabbi.
Rabbi. What time are you doing Sundays at 9 a.m.?
Yes.
Okay. Have Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi. Thank you.
Shabbat shalom.